What's up, buttercups? Welcome back to my channel. Today's nonfiction book review is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. I have said her last name previously wrong. I'm so sorry, Caitlin. But you would probably know her better as Ask a Mortician on YouTube. I found Caitlin through YouTube first. I had no idea for quite a few months that she wrote books. And so I got the first book that I knew of. It's Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? And other questions about dead bodies, basically. Don't be surprised if we're going to get a little quote-unquote graphic about death. Everyone does it. It's very trendy, and you don't make it out alive. So if you are not interested in death, decay, funerals, how you want your body to be handled and buried or not buried, then just click right on off, because we are going deep into the funeral and death industry. This nonfiction memoir is perfect. 5 out of 5 stars. Shining bright in the dark, macabre sky that is our world. I don't usually give star ratings to nonfiction, especially memoirs, but this is worth 5 stars. I laughed, I cried, I had an existential crisis, and then I realized, just like as Caitlin was going through her emotions about dying, I can feel a little better by setting up a will and writing out how my body is handled after I die. I love the cover, simple yet bold with the fire, namely cremation, because in the United States, cremation is one of the top 5 most popular ways to dispose of a body, hence why there's a fire. She did a lot of cremations, and it is a good chunk of what she did when she was part of a particular funeral home, when she got into the funeral home cremation burial industry, and how she does not like it, so she opened her own funeral home in Los Angeles. So like I said, if you don't know about Caitlin, she's Ask a Mortician on YouTube, and though she doesn't post as much because YouTube hits her with a lot of reports and demonetization and all that stuff, even though she's talking about what everyone does. So she's not on it as much as she used to be, but we love to see her whenever she uploads. She also has a Patreon where they don't do that to her. So she has an option for Patreon. Also, after this whole experience, she set up a nonprofit. Actually, I think she has 2, because her funeral home might be nonprofit. I should have looked that up, but it's very cheap. It's like at the lowest level that you can find in California, but also in LA, because she believes in not taking your money and swindling you when it comes to your deceased loved ones. Amazing thought, right? Now I'm going to read the back of the blurb because it is accurate to the book. Thank you so much, publishers. And then we'll get into my favorite conversations and scenes and what I want to do with my body when I pass away. Armed with a degree in medieval history and a flair for the macabre, Caitlin Doughty took a job at a crematory and turned a fascination with death into her life's work. She cared for bodies of every color, shape, and affliction, and became an explorer in the world of the dead. In this best-selling memoir, brimming with gallows humor and vivid characters, she marvels at the gruesome history of undertaking and relates her unique coming-of-age story with bold curiosity and mordant wit. By turns hilarious, dark, and uplifting, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes reveals how the fear of dying warps our society and will make you reconsider how our culture treats the dead. Absolutely accurate regarding that last point. Americans, for some reason, well, she gets into her ideas of why, but Americans are death phobic. I totally understand. I don't want to die. I'm terrified to die. I don't like the thought of dying because I love life and it gets me really, really upset. However, you know, I think Caitlin's the only person that I know of that has outright said the same thing, because I have tried to have these conversations with other people and they don't want to talk about it, or they're religious and they're like, I don't care because I'm going to heaven. Okay, ego. But that aside, that's great for you if you think that. I've actually had a lot of conversations with people that are like, yeah, my life sucks ass, but I'm going to heaven and it's perfect, so it doesn't matter. And I'm just, you know, stuck where I'm at, and it is what it is, which, all right, that's a different topic. So that's what I've gotten used to. But Caitlin actually had a very traumatizing experience where she saw, as a child, another child fall from the second or third, I'm pretty sure it was second, story of a open concept mall, and the child died in front of her, and no one talked about it with her. She didn't go to therapy, nothing of the sort. So that is where the obsession with death, and she actually had OCD-like symptoms. I don't know if she still has it. It seemed like after she became like 13, 14, those OCD rituals to stop death kind of faded away. She could still have OCD-like symptoms. Actually, it could have turned into actual OCD, because when you have OCD, it's either genetic, medical, trauma, or environmental. So that makes sense. She sees a child fall from a very high height, and the child dies right in front of her, and that is her experience with death. So of course she's going to have these rituals with OCD where she has to like tap a bunch of times before leaving the house, or she breathes into her shirt every time something, I forget the specifics, but she's breathing and like spitting into her shirt so her mom doesn't die a horrible death. And like, these rituals don't usually make sense, especially when you're a child. She was in elementary school when this happened, so you might say that that's weird. Sure, but no one talked to her about it, so she is dealing with this really heavy graphic trauma just hanging out in her brain, and she didn't process it properly until, you know, later in her life as an adult. That's why she developed OCD. I don't know if it's still around. Maybe in one of her videos that I haven't watched, she talks about it. But I just know that was a sad, sad part to read in her memoir. But it's all about her, and she's very, very honest. So I very much appreciate telling the thing that creeped her out, not even just creeped out, traumatized her enough where then she went into medieval history and she read and wrote a lot about medieval deaths and funerals and just, you know, the history in general and how brutal it was. And then she went to go to a crematory. It was also a funeral home in San Francisco, and that is a big portion of the memoir. But at the end, she does speak about something that is very personal, and I was kind of sensing that something was going to happen, because, you know, you have this huge traumatic experience, no one talked to you about it, you've developed OCD, there's a lot of stuff there still. And so she, after a few events that happened, kind of smaller events over the course of many years, and then one big event of being rejected by a man that she loved, she goes into the forest near, well, somewhat near her place, and she, let's just say, was planning not to come back out of the forest. However, she had an epiphany, and that's when she realized that she wanted to live and she wanted to do better regarding the funeral home and the death business. And going back to why Americans are so death phobic, and they don't talk about it whatsoever, and they like to hide everything, or as much as they can, and they're not in the process of cleaning the body, hanging out with the body. Yes, I said it. Going through the motions of burying or cremating or doing whatever you or the deceased person wants with the body. It's very closed off. And what Caitlin talks about is, in the late 1800s, there was a surge of less religion, more medical, more doctors, more technology and science, and that's the best way. And in many ways, I agree. I'm an atheist, and so is Caitlin. However, when you take out the relationship between the living and the dead, and just trying to make the dead body as alive as you can with makeup and embalming, things like that, and separating them so far away from one another, and making up arbitrary rules that people think are the law, but they're not. As in, there's a lot of people in every state that think that you need to send the body within an hour to a funeral home as per the law, which is not the case. And you see that a lot in Caitlin's memoir, where you have people calling this funeral home saying, do I need to get the body of my mother to you? I was sitting there with my mom and we were grieving and we're crying, and oh, it was like 45 minutes. Like, can you make it in 15 minutes? Or you, as the loved one, has as much time as you want. Technically, and I know this is going to sound weird to some people, but it's the truth, you now own the dead body. Per law, there are things that you can and can't do depending on the state, of course. However, there is no law that Caitlin mentioned that I know of, and because I looked this up, existential crisis, that says you have to get the body to a funeral home within an hour or 3 hours or whatever. And if you don't, then you are arrested. There's no such thing. You know what the proponent of that is? Funeral homes, because they want your money and they want you to be, unfortunately, rushed. And they will push very expensive coffins and embalming and other things that are not necessary. But in your grief, they want to rush you, and they trick you, and sometimes they just like outright lie to you because they want you to spend $15,000 instead of $1,000. I've never been a big fan of funeral homes other than mom and pop funeral homes. However, that's very hard to find. So do your research for sure. I would never trust my body with a funeral home that has 3,000 other funeral homes under their belt across the United States. That's not happening, but you know, that's a hot take that I agree with, and Caitlin really hones in on that. She also talks a lot about cremation and how she cremated bodies, and this is bringing together the family and the loved one that has passed away and trying to connect them back instead of very much separating them. So basically, funeral homes do have an option of, even if you are cremating a loved one, you can be there at the cremation and you can set up like little mini altars even in the crematory, and you can have people witnessing the burning of the body, and you can even have people pushing the buttons. Now, if the funeral home says, no, we don't do that, you can pass right along with them, because that is unnecessary. And for thousands upon thousands of years, well, really up until the late 1800s, human beings were very much involved with the burial process. And mourning was part of that process, with the body in the same room or nearby. And there were people of the family and friends that were helping with this death process. But we have cut that off and moved it over in the United States to really focusing on just the doctors and nurses and funeral home workers doing all of that. And then, well, you maybe get a 2 or 1 or 3 hour wake or ceremony, and then we pack it up because we have someone else get out. And that, I think, has made Americans really, really death phobic. It's absolutely okay to be scared of death. Absolutely okay. But it's just made worse with that separation. And so Caitlin, at the end of this novel, sets up her own funeral home in LA. And she highly encourages people to be part of the process with her and her fellow employees. And like I said before, it is cheap compared to other funeral homes. Like, you know, the casket, $15,000. Whereas, you know, hers is like $1,000, $2,000. Like, she is not trying to make a huge profit, or really like at all. I'm almost certain that that funeral home might be a nonprofit. I am not 100% sure. So sorry. Then she has another nonprofit that is the Good Death. No. Oh my God. I'm going to look it up. 1 second, because I want to get this correct. Okay, I'm back. And it is the Order of the Good Death. That is a nonprofit. And the aim for that nonprofit is building a meaningful, eco-friendly, and equitable end of life. I'm not a member because I can't afford it. However, I follow them on Facebook, and they also make posts on YouTube and all of that stuff. So if you're interested in learning more about how you can connect more with life and death, and also what you want to do with your body, how to have conversations with your loved ones and your friends about what they want to do with their will and their body, and how to set all of that up, the Order of the Good Death is for you. Also, ask Mortician. She has all the info on her YouTube channel. This is a very well-written memoir about death and dying and grief and the funeral home industry. So, like I said, maybe not for you if that upsets you. There is a lot of humor, dark humor, macabre humor that's involved. And so if you don't think that jokes about death, I'm sorry, if you don't think jokes about death are funny, you probably wouldn't like this memoir. I laughed a shitload. So it's for me. Sometimes, actually like a lot of the time, humor just is the best medicine. It's also free. And at this point, you can't escape death. You never have, and you never will. Or maybe. I don't see how you can. So look, you never will. Just make fun of it. Y'all gonna die. I'm gonna die. I think what people are scared most of is how they die. And that is actually part of the Order of the Good Death, and how to overcome that, or at least work on it. I feel that. And also just wanting to do all the things, but knowing you can't do all the things about life. So, you know, gotta accept that. Just like I can't read all of the books out there, so I'm gonna read all the books that I can. Now, if you can handle all the things that I mentioned, or you're on the fence, I think this memoir will help you come face to face with death and the funeral home business nonsense in a safe, humorous, and emotional way. So I absolutely recommend this memoir. Caitlin's such a doll and so honest. Love her and all that she does for the death industry, though she wants to not think of it as an industry, but at this point it basically is. I mean, with things that you cannot go around or fix or get rid of, it's gonna turn into an industry sooner rather than later, and the death industry has definitely done that. So this got me thinking about my death and funeral. I do need to set up a will and LLC for my books. That's going to be like a 2025 goal. In my state, you can also do what's called green burials, and one of them is a bio urn where you're first cremated and then put into an urn with a tree's seed, and it's then planted. Another option I saw that's really cool is a natural burial where you buy a plot of land, but you're just wrapped in basic cloth and then lowered into the ground and slowly turn into compost for everything around you. That one's up in the air because you have to buy a burial plot. Okay. Another cremation-like option I just heard of in my state is aqua cremation. The body's placed in really hot water in a pressure vessel with a combination of hot water and potassium hydroxide, and then heated to about 320 degrees Fahrenheit, and it takes less than 24 hours for the full process. Then you can do whatever you want with your ashes. So then I was thinking aqua cremation over fire cremation because there's a lot of CO2 and other stuff that goes into the atmosphere with fire cremation. And I just like the thought of water cremation. Don't ask me why. Maybe because I love water. Let's just go with that. I found out about bio urns how long ago? Like 20 years ago? What did I say? 15, 20 years ago? And that's always been my thought. And I knew, of course, that I was going to be cremated because you have to be cremated to be put into the urn and have the tree get those nutrients to help it grow. But then someone's mentioned that the tree doesn't really get as much nutrients as you would think, so you're technically not a tree, because the whole idea was you're turning into a tree, kind of, sort of. And I might have to look into if that is accurate or not, because I want to turn into a tree with my ashes. It's like I'm reborn. But as you can tell, of course, depending by your state, there are so many options other than embalming and being buried in an expensive casket. I know the conversation about what you want to do with your body and setting up a will and all of that stuff is very scary, but it's healthy to talk about death and your plans with your body. If it is still uncomfortable, think of it in this way. When you have passed away, do you want to have the burden of your family dealing with nothing set up at all and they have to figure everything out for you? Or do you want to have everything set up, or almost everything set up, and it be a smooth transition? Just keep that in mind, because I have seen, unfortunately, a lot of people that have not set up anything, and their family members are not just grieving their loss, they are trying to figure out what the hell to do. And that's very uncomfortable. That adds to the stress and the terror and just the overall sadness going on. So if you don't want to face the idea of having to set up a will and what to do with your body, then think about your loved ones and how they would feel if everything was already planned out for them, and then they can take that time to grieve. Of course, there's things to do when you have everything set up, but it's going to be a smoother transition versus them chaotically running around trying to figure out what's going on and how to do all of those things as well as grieving. I love Caitlin and Ask a Mortician and The Order of the Good Death and all those things. I highly recommend this memoir, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and I just recommend everything regarding Caitlin. She does an amazing job with her advocacy work regarding death and the funeral home business. You do not need to feel pressure to spend a crap load of money. You do not need to do that. You can take the time that you need to grieve with your loved one that has passed away. So I hope that this conversation has helped you just a little bit in the topic of dying and how to set up everything so there's a more solid transition between your death, the funeral, and your final resting place. Thank you so much for watching and have a fantastic day. Bye.